Hi everyone, and a warm welcome to Scott Logic's panel discussion today, in line with the International Women's Day theme of Breaking the Bias. We're very pleased to have our own Chief Talent Officer, Myra Cooke, facilitating. So morning, Myra, thanks for joining.
Morning.
And I'm sure it's going to be a fascinating conversation. So let me introduce you to your stellar lineup of panelists today. So starting off with Jo Graham, Chief Information Officer at Boohoo and CIO of the Year winner at last week's Women in Tech Awards. So congratulations, Jo, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Claire.
And next we have Jacqui Leggetter, Deputy Director and Head of Integration at DWP. Thanks for joining, Jacqui.
Thank you. Morning, everyone.
And last but not least, May Clark, Head of Technology for Short-Term Borrowing at NatWest. Morning, and thanks for joining, May.
Morning, and good morning, everyone.
So they will be discussing the numerous topics around today's theme of breaking the bias, with a particular focus on their experience in IT leadership. This is a topic that's as important as ever, because a recent report by the ONS showed that the number of women working in technology generally, not just IT, has risen to 31% in the last year, which is great news. However, other data shows us that women in IT leadership positions is stagnating at around 10%, and that hasn't risen for the last 2 years. So I'm going to pass you over to Myra to get the conversation going. If you'd like to ask a question to the panel, do get them into the Q&A box or the chat, and we'll take as many as we can at the end. But over to you, Myra.
Thank you, Claire. And hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I just want to also say welcome to our panelists, Jo, Jacqui, and Mel, for being with us today. As you know, today is International Women's Day, and I think that's the sort of the sign that, and the theme is hashtag break bias, which is the focus of our discussion today. So happy International Women's Day, everyone. It's so good to have you with us. I think we can agree that looking beyond bias and increasing representation for previously disadvantaged groups is so important now, more so than ever. And Claire provided us with some stats, and I'm just going to, I guess, add to that, because recently, according to the Hampton Alexander Review report, the number of women on FTSE boards has risen by 50% in the last 5 years, with more than a third of FTSE 350 board positions that are now being held by women, which is great progress for FTSE companies, right? Obviously, there's still a way to go until we reach parity more broadly. And so with that in mind, my first question to the panel is, how important do you think it is to have equal representation at board level? And do you think that the increase in women at board level will start to have an impact on the number of women rising to other senior positions in those organizations? I'm just going to pass the baton on and start with Jo. What are your thoughts on this, Jo?
Thanks, Myra. I think it's absolutely imperative that you have women at board level and all diverse groups represented at board level, because any business should want to represent their customers and should want to represent the demographic that they do business with. So it's almost lunacy not to have your board representative of the population. It's just bad business sense. And I think in terms of will it inspire others? Absolutely. If you have role models, you see that it can be achieved, and you see that other people are doing it, then it makes it very real, and it almost stops being as aspirational, because you can see there are trailblazers, and you should follow that trail.
Yeah. It's great in the reference to role modeling as well. I think that's quite critical, isn't it? The more difference or diversity you see at the top, the greater inspiration and aspiration there are for those that are still climbing that career ladder. Jacqui, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, we have the old saying of people living in their ivory towers. And I think that's never so true as when we have a board that isn't representative of their customers, as Joe mentioned. And certainly in government, if we think about how we represent society, it's really important that we're in touch with what society needs from us as a civil service. And to do that, that means we need to level up. So we hear the government talking a lot about levelling up. That's not just on gender and protected diverse characteristics, but also people from different social backgrounds, people from different cultures. It's really important that across the civil service, we fully represent the people who we serve. We've got a long way to go. We are making real progress, but I think creating the role models that make people that maybe traditionally wouldn't look at the civil service as a career, creating those role models. And the same goes for technology, for trying to encourage more girls and more diversity in technology, having good role models, and encouraging and outreach programs, getting people interested, is really important. So having diversity at the board level really supports and helps that. And having the diversity of thinking at board level is really important as well. If you want to run a diverse business and you want to represent your customers or your citizens, it's important that the people making those decisions are role modeling and making the decisions in the interest of the people who they serve and of their employees, if we think about the mix of employees in a company, having that diversity as well.
Thank you, Jacqui. And I think on that point, I mean, if you look at representation across the board, have you had any, feedback in your organizations when they see that there's this imbalance? Have they been outspoken? Have your people actually challenged some of what they see? May?
Yeah, definitely. When you see people at board level, and if they don't represent the people across the organisation or their customers, you're definitely going to get that sense of that them and us, and that's where the ivory towers come in. Are they relatable? Do they speak on our behalf? Are they taking the company and organisation in the direction that we all want to go in? And I also think when you look at diversity and inclusion, part of inclusion is not just having women or other fairly obvious groups around ethnicity and age. It's also about personalities as well. We need to see board members who that it may be maybe somebody who's male and who's white. We've got to get away from that sense of, well, if it's a male white person, at board level they'll play golf. If they can demonstrate that they do other things, it makes them much more relatable, and it makes people feel that they are part of the same organisation. So I think it's just so important that seeing people, they need to role model, the wider characteristics that represents the people who are working and the customers that serve.
Thank you. And I think what we picked up from this sort of discussion is that the whole idea of role modeling, leveling up, being representative of society, but also not holding stereotypical views of individuals is quite important when we look at how we break bias down, because we all hold it, and not jump into assumptions. So, during my career, I was exposed to and part of delivering some amazingly impactful women's development program in particular, at a previous organization that helped women in more junior roles to build confidence and skills to step out and assert themselves, whilst they were managing their own personal needs and circumstances. And this, I guess personally, it was extremely fulfilling and wonderful to see growth of these communities of women, career-wise, but also around self-development. So how important are D&I initiatives in organizations, even if whether it's targeted or not? What has been the most impactful activity that you've seen in your career, and not just specific, to gender? We can go to Jacqui again. That helps.
Yeah, sure. So I think, speaking from a personal perspective, the biggest impact activity in my career is having an ally at board level. So having reached, a senior level in the civil service, getting into the deputy director role and beyond, having an ally, having someone to support you at a senior level has been really impactful for me personally. I think across the organisation, the diversity and inclusion activities that we have in play, we have loads of different groups that cover off diversity in the protected characteristics. And one of our really most successful programs has been a program called Digital Voices. And Digital Voices was a program for women who are maybe not as confident in speaking publicly, and it's about helping women find their voice in there's a lot of people who are maybe more introvert and maybe not confident, and sometimes we all suffer from that little bit of imposter syndrome. Yeah. And the Digital Voices is a program that runs specifically to help people build that confidence and really get in front of audiences and speak and write blogs and create podcasts and really build confidence that has then helped them springboard into their next career move. Mm-hmm. I think there's lots of other things that we have across a whole range of the protected characteristics and non-protected characteristics. But I think for us, we're trying to share lots of information. We have a lot of race network groups, and it's really important that we understand some of the biases and some of the prejudices that some of our colleagues feel and experience day in, day out, not necessarily in the workplace, but even outside of the workplace. I had one of my colleagues tell me about when we first went into lockdown, when he used to go out for a walk around about 7 o'clock in the evening, and he got stopped quite a lot. But then when he started taking his daughter with him, he didn't get stopped anymore. And I struggle to relate to that because that's never happened to me. But I think the more we share those stories and the more we understand the day-to-day challenges that people face, we can start to break those biases because we have a much better understanding of them. So I think any of the activities or programs that we run that just helps people who are maybe in a minority group for whatever reason is just a really great thing in terms of helping us break down biases, particularly in people that may have not been exposed to wider cultural experiences through education, etc.
Yeah, that's great. It's really interesting, the Digital Voices program that you mentioned, because I think a couple of years ago, there was a report that was published that was called The Confidence Gap, which was linked to women and how we feel when we apply for roles as well, right? We want to tick every single box, and until it's like 90 to 90%, right, we can do that, then we'll apply, where versus men who would probably hit 60 to 70% of, yep, I can do that, but I'm going the others other bits I can learn along the way. So it's really important, the whole building of confidence around women to put themselves forward there and raising their voices or leaning in to those challenges. So I find that sounds like a great initiative, and really something that also connects to the program that I'd experienced. And the lived experience about the example you gave, the individual going for walks with his daughter or her daughter, I think that's about, again, it's not so much traditional learning, isn't it? It's more around raising awareness and sharing experiences. Jo, do you have any thoughts on or anything that you want to share around this?
Yeah, just a couple of things actually. So from a personal perspective in Boohoo, we're quite a diverse organisation anyway. I mean, everyone's welcome. There's no dress code. Our demographic's extremely young. It represents our customer. So it's an extremely funky environment for anybody to work in. And I think that whole creating an environment where everyone feels welcome and can be themselves is it sounds really straightforward and easy, but it's some organizations are probably more able to do it easier than others, and certainly, you know, because of what we do, and you know, as a result, you know, our environment is extremely down to earth and quite welcoming in that respect. You know, I'm probably the dullest dresser in the whole business and haven't got anywhere near as many piercings or tattoos on show most days. So yeah, so it's, but you know, and it is that, you know, I imagine it's harder to do that in more rigid corporate, and well, I know because I've worked in them, but you know, corporates I think are probably on a far harder way of trying to, you know, get rid of the stereotypings and that bias. There's just something else that you know, I was going to mention, and it's a bit around that confidence gap you mentioned, and I was lucky enough to go on a development course when I was younger in my HBOS days, and it was all around developing senior women. It was led by some professors from Cranfield, so brilliant insights and things that he covered. But one of them was around how we as women almost won't take compliments. So back to your kind of reading of the job description and assuming we're not good enough. And we do it all the day, and you'll all do it today. So I'm going to challenge you not to do it today. Somebody will say to you, oh, your hair looks really good, or that dress is amazing, or, you know, where did you get your jumper? And our immediate response is to say, oh, this old thing, or, oh, I got it in a sale, or, oh yeah, well, I was on a panelist, so I've done my hair today because I wanted to look good. We don't just say, oh, thanks. You know, we find a reason to almost bat that compliment away. So, and I think that's a big thing in that whole confidence gap. And, you know, if we don't own it, and if we don't kind of role model it, behave it, and it's not just in a work environment, we do it with all our friends as well. So, you know, that's my kind of one ask out of this is take the compliments, you know, ride the wave and pass it on.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I started recently practicing that in reality. You know, when you get a compliment or somebody says something positive, is to say thank you. Because I normally I have to pause on the thank you, but thank you. Because normally you try and find some sort of a story or a narrative that delays, you know, focusing on the
or deflects it. We don't own it, do we? So I think we need to start owning how amazing we all are.
Absolutely. And what better day to do that than International Women's Day?
There you go.
May, I'm sure at NatWest there's loads of initiatives or activities around opportunities to look at bias and how we can break that. What are some of the stuff that you've been exposed to?
So it's really reassuring when we have these conversations. So, you know, when you work for your organization, sometimes you feel like you're in a bubble, but having these conversations with, you know, others, it's just reassuring that everyone is moving in the same direction. So, you know, just to Jacqui's point about, you know, corporate organizations, within NatWest, we're trying really hard, you know, in the tech world to make things look really cool. You know, we're not competing in a financial workplace, you know, in its entirety. When you're in tech, you're competing with the likes of Facebook, Google, you know, and you have to look at the reasons why they attract, you know, so many different people, you know, such a young, vibrant and, you know, diverse population, as well as, you know, very experienced people who can, you know, lead the way as well. So within NatWest, you know, what we do, we're just trying to make you know, diversity, equity and inclusion just part of, you know, the normal conversations that we have. You know, you can hope, you know, in any organization, or, you know, that those conversations would spring up naturally, but you know, it needs a bit of help. We have initiatives where we talk about unconscious bias. We provide, you know, real life examples, you know, they're kind of, you know, with the people's names anonymized, but, you know, ask people to comment, you know, on certain situations that are described. And, you know, we need to create that safe environment. There's no right or wrong answer. So, and it's about, you know, respecting other people's opinions, learning from others. And when you do create that environment, people feel safe to speak up, and then you have that conversation. So, we do a lot of these. We have things like, we call them choose to challenge. So, it's being an active bystander. When you see bias, it's not just walking by it. What techniques can we use to challenge what we see? And when you have these, initiatives and discussions that happen across the organisation, it actually makes it easier for other members of the team. If they see things happening that they don't feel is quite right, they've got something to refer back to. It's almost as though they have that support, implicit support across the organisation, that this is not okay, and this is how you can address it. So, those kinds of initiatives, we have them. We encourage all of our teams across the bank to have these conversations in very small groups, so that you can have those conversations. And, and as a result of that, people will have that better understanding of, what their colleagues are like, what their thought processes are, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. It's just about getting to know people more, beyond what you do on a day-to-day basis at work.
Great. And I like the concept of bystander. And sometimes in some training initiatives, they talk about being a bystander, and that's worse than actually, being on the other end of that conversation by just standing and doing nothing about it. When you can see something is wrong is worse. Then I think there's a terminology between being I can't remember. Okay, I'm gonna not try and find that in my brain at this point in time, because there's two statements that I can remember when we were doing training around, what's the difference between being an ally. Being an ally means you're actually proactive about something and taking a stand when you see something is wrong, versus you think it's wrong in your mind, but you don't do anything about it and you let it pass because it's safer. And that connects itself back to the culture you create and some of the stuff that you mentioned, which is creating that safe, open culture that allows these conversations to take place because people have permission, and that psychological safety that goes with that. And that's all part of more than just training. It's about the whole role modeling and everything else we've spoken about. So, I guess we could also argue that conversations around bias need to start happening a lot earlier, right, in the person's life. So according to a recent UK study, only 19% of students, for example, in higher education studying computer sciences are female. And the number of women that are working in IT has remained around 15% for the past 7 years. Jacqui, what are your thoughts, starting with you? What's your thoughts on what needs to be done at, a grassroots level, for example, at home, at school, to encourage more girls into tech careers? What more do you think we could do?
I think we really do need to start at grassroots level in the schools. And I think traditionally, IT is seen as computer science, which is programming. It's seen as a bit nerdy. And I do feel that until the curriculum changes, we will struggle to get more diversity into technology. I don't think that the curriculum in technology recognises that there are many, many different roles in technology outside of programming and engineering. And we bring the diversity through engineering as well as other roles. So I feel that the curriculum has to change significantly and be more reflective of what digital world looks like. And sure, programming may be a big part of that, but it's not the only part. So I think the curriculum really needs to change. I think we go out and, responsible organisations will go out and do STEM events in schools. I talk a lot of STEM events targeted at girls particularly. But again, it's about pushing them into doing GCSEs, A-levels and computer science. And I do feel that there's an awful lot more that, certainly when I go out and talk to girls in school, I talk about the fun things that we do through agile delivery. We talk about the full range of roles that we have that are open, but the pathways into them are not always clear in the schools, and I don't think the schools careers councils are educated enough either to actually help people make choices into things like project management and, you know, all of those other service designs, you know, where we can bring in real diverse thinking. So I think that's the first way to tackle it. And I think the second way, and we're certainly using the second route in government and in DWP Digital, is through apprenticeships. So attracting people in A-level students. We're not looking for people with computing science A-levels. We're bringing people in that maybe have an aptitude for technology or project management, and we're bringing them in and putting them through a sponsored apprenticeship in a number of different roles, so business analyst, delivery management, and engineering as well. And I think what we are seeing through the apprenticeship route is a much bigger diversity, and certainly in females applying for the apprenticeships, we're seeing as high as 50% across some of these roles. So I think that that's a real eye-opener, and maybe something that we can build on and improve even more. But I think those are the grassroots things that we need to address to bring more diversity in.
Yeah, it sounds like there's definitely, you know, deeper conversations to be had, and advocacy and campaigning around a shifting curriculum in technology, and I guess some deeper thought around how to influence this agenda to attract more diverse learners. It's really interesting that I'm a strong advocate of apprenticeships having implemented in different organizations, and it's an amazing opportunity or avenue to target diverse groups of the population that are more reflective of communities where people have not had opportunity to go to your red brick universities or universities in general, but have potential and to bring them into a different career. Would you agree, Jerry? What's your thoughts in this space around where we are?
I think it's extremely tricky. I mean, I've done similar to Jacqui, the sessions in schools, and I remember doing one actually at my children's school a number of years ago, and 4 or 5 lads wandered in to talk to me, and the first thing they said to me is, "How many languages can you code in then?" And I was like, "None. I can't code in any languages. I've never been a coder." And they like didn't get it, did not compute. So I had a conversation with them, exactly that. Like, tech is not just about coding, but it did make me realise that that's why none of the girls are coming in the room. I managed to drag a few in and talk to them about business analysis and project management, and they were far more motivated by those kind of more creative diagnostic type roles than the thought of sitting and coding and sort of spend and you know. And I think we definitely need to find the way that we tap into girls. And I've seen Colin's comment in the chat around that whole digital world and UX and dev and you know, there's a whole creative world out there that, you know, you could sell to both girls and boys, I'm sure. But certainly a lot of the lads just want to code and be gamer, you know, they want to code gaming, and it was a bit of an education around you know, that is not what tech is all about. There's a whole range of things that have to happen before you can start coding, and showing that whole almost pipeline to the end product was an interesting conversation. And I think, yeah, and we've had success attracting girls through the internships, and obviously we have apprentices as well, but yeah, we've had the interns that have come with us for their placement year and then turned into our grads a year after. And the nature of what we do, we've also kept some of the interns working for us part-time when they've gone back to uni. Most of them want a part-time role, and we've managed to you know, and we've managed to find things they can do, be it service tickets or whatever, that they can pick up and leave based on the hours that they can commit to work for us. So I think there is something around finding your interns and keeping hold of them. I did get quite grumpy last year when Boohoo's interns were photographed and announced on, I think, so we certainly put it on LinkedIn, and they were predominantly girls, because, you know, that's they were buyers, they were you know, they were designers, and there was one lad in there who was tech, but what nobody picked up on was one of the girls was in tech as well. So she just got bundled in with this big assumption that whereas from a tech lens, the fact that we had a girl and a boy is pretty phenomenal. But she just got lumped in with the fact that Boohoo had only recruited women. And it's like, no, that's good. In tech, that's good. That's what we want. But yeah, it just did make me quite grumpy. But yeah, there's no news story in that one, is there? Pointing out that one of the girls was actually coming into IT.
No, and that's against the stereotypical view, right? All right. So I guess if we wanted to, let's shift gear a little bit, because we talked about apprenticeships, we talked about ways of, perhaps looking deeper into how curriculum could be re-looked through, whether it's campaigning or advocacy by organizations. I guess that's a starting point. If we think about recruitment and how we bring diversity into the organization, we know that technology itself offers us one way to eliminate bias in our practices. But what else do you think we could do to prevent bias when recruiting new staff? Who wants to jump in first on this one? May, you on the screen.
Yeah. So I can jump in. I mean, there are some really obvious things that we can all do. So when a CV comes in, I always ask for the names to be removed and, details, around, personal details. So you look at the skills. So, you're not prejudging somebody based on, their gender or other diverse or protected characteristics there. Also, when we're hiring, it's important to have a diverse interview panel. And, those people, we all need to be trained to look out for where those unconscious bias points are. So, when we interview, we always have, I'm obviously in quite high demand because, I'm female, I'm from an ethnic background. But, I tend to choose somebody who is on the opposite end of the spectrum as well, or different, so that you get a different view, different perception, as well as, showing the interview candidate that we are a different organisation as well, that values different, different characteristics and qualities there. I think the other thing that we can do, when recruiting is look at things that are wider as well than the skills. It's about those, core values, the capabilities that people have. Are they curious? Are they, are they creative? Because when you look at the skill sets that's required to deliver, technology, it's not just a program that processes data. As we move further and further, advanced in technology, we have AI. We need to have, people who can think and provide opinions around, how do we encompass, these different types of customer viewpoints? How do we build that into AI so that we have that balanced, system and technology ecosystem to continue to build and grow the the insights that we have there. So there are some really basic things that everyone should be doing. They're no-brainers, but then it's looking and peeling the onion and looking beyond. This person has X amount of skill sets, and hire, looking to make the job more appealing. So it could be a job in technology, but not saying we're recruiting a systems engineer. You could basically say we're recruiting or looking for creative people to work on this really exciting project that will deliver benefits for this group of people or customers. So they might not immediately gravitate and think that's technology, that's not for me.
Yeah, that's a really good aspect to look at, because I think it's about language, right? So the language we utilize to attract individuals into roles, and that can actually segment populations of or categories of individuals if they feel, oh, that doesn't sound like me. And the fact that you talked about recruiting beyond just the technical skills as well, because now more than ever, we need more than just bundling individuals into a box that has specific technical or technological skills. We need people that can actually build relationships, influence, set up teams, and there's the whole behavioral aspect that needs to be thought about. But in most adverts, when you look at some of these roles, you think, oh gosh, that sounds pretty boring, standard, and that's why more systems are coming into play around language and adverts. I don't know if has any of you used things like Textio, or which changes the language of an advert. And I get the second part of this is, how easy has it been to get those diverse panels working in your organization to make sure that we eradicating patterns of behavior in the recruitment process? Jacqui?
Yeah, so certainly in DWP, our first round of recruitment in terms of reviewing and sifting is always anonymous. So HR remove the personal details, so you cannot identify the individual, which is good because it's given everyone a level playing field. I think the wording of the advert is interesting, and I think Mia made a really good point around thinking about how you describe the role and you describe your organisation is really important, because if you're trying to attract a diverse range of people, what you don't want to say is things like, you must have 10 years experience of doing this, because you've probably got people with 10 years experience of doing this, right? What you want is to bring new ways of thinking. So for us, it's about identifying and building those transferable skills. So sure, if you're going to be a software engineer, you'll need some software engineering experience, but we're not going to say you need 10 years experience of coding in Java or Python, because if you can code in one of those languages, chances are you can learn to code in another. So for us, it's about the transferable skills. And I think it's important in your recruitment adverts to describe the culture of your organisation to attract people. And while it may be stating the obvious, also state your position on diversity and inclusion, because if it's not read out and people are reading it, then it's not in your advert. It may be perceived it's not important enough to you. So I think it's really important that we call that out. So we tend to use organisational psychologists to review the wording in our adverts and to review the success rates from those adverts. So we'll look back around and we find what works in the adverts and maybe some campaigns that haven't gone so well. So we find things like offering our flexible working can be a big attraction. Having flexible working, lots of annual leave. It's not always about the pay package. The role itself, describing the role, giving it context, is important as well. So I think that how you advertise the role is really important. We've also offer people with a disability a guaranteed interview. So disabled people are a very underrepresented group, more so probably than any other in digital, and we offer a guaranteed interview for anyone with a recognised disability, so they automatically get through the initial stage, which gives a good opportunity. And I think the other thing that we've ran a couple of times is exercises targeted at neurodiverse people, so particularly targeted people with autism, and we've had some success in that field, and something that we've run I think twice now, and will run again because we've had success and we've had some great people through that campaign. Just by adjusting how we interview, adjusting how we recruit them, making sure that the style that we use supports the way that those great people will interact and show their best to us through that process. In terms of getting diversity on the panels, we're pretty good, I would say. 95% of the time we have diversity on our panels. We will rather delay a panel to get the right representation on it rather than run it without that diversity. So I think we do pretty well on that. Always room for a bit more improvement, but we do pretty well.
Sounds like you're doing a lot of stuff and great stuff. I actually want to pick your brain, I think, separately out of on how you do those exercises for neurodiverse individuals, because it's something that we are looking at as well from an inclusive perspective. And we've heard some great ideas. Yeah, but I don't want to leave Joe out of the conversation because Boohoo obviously has a unique population as well, right? Of creatives as well. Yeah.
And I think our job descriptions do describe the company, and they're quite informal. We wouldn't have a panel or describe anything in that language. And certainly we're very cognizant of not putting together exercises or PowerPoints or so we've almost made the process informal, and it's more around a conversation than anything heavily structured. Certainly in the early stages of an interview, and depending on what the interview's for, it is far more conversational. And people will meet one or two of the hiring manager and someone else. And we don't do interviews with HR. We do them very much across the team, and we quite often get people involved who would be the individual's peer. So we've probably got a very big population that can help with the hiring process, but very cognizant of keeping it informal because that's the culture, and very, very cognizant as well of just describing the organisation in terms of pace and how kind of opportunistic and entrepreneurial it is. So we make sure that our recruitment process very much reflects that. And do try and desperately stay away from anything that might be perceived as too formal or corporate, because we just know people won't end up being a cultural fit. But I think that then naturally attracts a diverse candidate, because people feel like, whoever they are, they'll be, that there is no norm really.
So that sense of belonging, that they'll be able to fit in. You used the term cultural fit, which is interesting because we had this conversation, I think, recently around companies are now changing to, culture add or value add, because they find that term is bringing a certain type in. What are your thoughts on that?
Cultural fit is probably our number one. Because we're extremely agile, extremely opportunistic, and that isn't for everybody. Some people like structure, and there's nothing wrong with structure, and there's nothing wrong with having a kind of defined way of doing things, especially in large organizations, because the last thing you want is chaos. But for us, I mean, we as tech will get asked to support some quite crazy aspirations that the business might. I mean, we did last year, we bought 4 brands, Debenhams in January, Wallis, Doris Perkins and Burton's in February, and they all went live within 2 weeks of each other in April, and that isn't for everybody. So there is a bit of that informal acquisition, entrepreneurial spirit. Hopefully it does absolutely attract a wide candidate base and people from hugely diverse backgrounds and genders. But you can't forget that there's that's the kind of the doing, and then there's still this that's not for everyone piece. But yeah,
I get that. Actually, I have worked at a fast-paced retail organization, and we had quite a high turnover in the first 6 months because of individuals not being able to keep up, coming from different type of backgrounds, not being able to keep up with the type of pace.
And that's where the interview and that cultural fit and being quite, I find, informally chatting to people, you get far more of them than if, because everyone will practice what they need to practice for an interview. So sometimes it's really turning it into more of a coffee and a chat. You tend to get far more, but then, that isn't always, that isn't necessarily what you need to do to show that you've potentially satisfied all the criteria and that you've covered everything. But we certainly weave in a whole raft of informal style conversations.
Great, thank you. And I guess from this round of feedback around recruitment, organizations adjust to what works in their space. But I think the most important thing is that we need to eliminate any areas across the recruitment process that perhaps hinder diversity from entering. And that's the big piece, isn't it? Is it when we're attracting? Is it the words and the language? Is it the pictures? we're utilizing versus the channels that we go through versus how we interview and talk to people, etc. So every step of the recruitment process needs a bit of a lens around inclusion and what will work for the organization. And there's some great ideas that come forward. I am now very conscious of time. It's been quite an interesting conversation, and there's so much to take away. But I also want to give all of our everyone that's dialed in an opportunity to ask us questions. So rather than just continuing the discussion, I want to hand over to Claire to see if there's anything for the panelists to answer. Claire, we've got a bit of time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's several questions coming through, and thank you all. That was a really fantastic conversation and so many useful and interesting points that have come out of that. I'm going to start now with Bhavini, because we all get to practice our homework that was set by Joe earlier, because Bhavini starts by saying, ladies, we all look lovely today. Thank you, Bhavini.
Thank you. Yes.
So Bhavini says, we'd love to hear from the panelists, things they do to remind themselves or remind themselves about during days one might feel defeated or feel like giving up. So who would like to take that one?
Obviously nobody. I'll take it. That's a great question. I think everyone has their thing they do, and if you haven't got a thing, ladies, you need to get a thing. And it might be as daft as going for a walk around the block and resetting your head, or going out for a coffee, or ringing the person in your life you love, or looking at some pictures on your phone of your kids, or something that makes it real, because work is work. Work is work. And I had a very good friend once who was a midwife, and something that always stayed in my head is, if I have a bad day, it probably means that a business case hasn't been signed off, or a system's gone down. If she has a bad day, it's a whole different story. So I think it is about finding that thing that grounds you, and make sure you know what your thing is, because you need a thing. You absolutely need a thing, because it will go wrong.
I think you do need a thing.
Yeah.
And it's also about perspective, isn't it? About having perspective. You need to step away, and the only way to step away and get perspective is to have that thing. So mine is my puppy.
There you go.
Distracts me, right? So I stand up or take a walk and play with her. Sometimes, in the afternoon, a glass of wine doesn't do any harm, as long as you don't overindulge. So I'm not encouraging people to pick the wine. But I think it's about perspective. And then you only get perspective when you step away from something, or you can immerse yourself in it, and it gets bigger in your head than it actually is. So, yeah. And when the sun comes out, as we enter spring, that's going to make it a little bit better as well. Sorry, Jacqui, you were saying something before I jumped in.
Yeah, I was just going to say the perspective thing's really important. Remembering, we all work hard, but equally we need to live, and taking that time out is so important. If you are having a really bad day, for me it is about, I might take the rest of the day off or take an hour out. I've got a crazy Labrador and Sprudel. I'll just sometimes go and throw the ball in the garden for a little bit for them, and come back to it afresh. But I do think the thing that you do is really important. And if it is a really bad day, take a day off. I think we can all be, particularly through the pandemic, we've all become slaves to the machines, where we start to confuse, I think. Do we work where we live, or do we live where we work? And I think it's really important that we create that boundary of work and boundary of home as well. Even if you are continuing to work from home or hybrid, it's really important that you have that degree of separation, and that you box it off and switch off from it. There's I think we talked a lot about in our teams in closing your laptop. Even if it's in the same room, the act of closing it, you're finished for the day, and making sure that you walk away and leave it. I think those kind of things are really important, especially when you're having a bad day. If your thing is close your laptop and come back to it in 10 minutes, then do it.
Yeah, be kind to yourself. Basically, that's what we're all saying, isn't it? Great stuff. May, unless you wanted to jump in with anything, I'll move on to the next point. No, right. So this is more of a point than a question, because we talked about neurodiversity, and Myra, you were saying, you know, that you'd quite like a chat with Jacqui afterwards about what they're doing there. So somebody's made a point in the chat here saying there's an organisation called the Donaldson Trust, who are a leading charity in Scotland in neurodiversity, and they have lots of information which you might find useful. So I'm reading that out in case anybody else dialing in wants to look into them also. But let's move on to another question. We've got here, when was the time when you all felt like you had reached success in your careers? And do you think it's more difficult for women to reach success that's celebrated by others and by society than it is for men? So who wants to kick that one off?
I'll go a bit with that one. Again, that the course I referenced earlier, one of the other things they talked about is women don't articulate they're ambitious. We really struggle to articulate or tell someone what we want and that we're ambitious. So when you're starting from that kind of, and whereas men find it very easy to articulate their ambitions, they'll ask for a pay rise. And this is the professors at Cranfield. So this is not based on, you know, anything is subjective. It was proper analysis and research. But you know, if you don't articulate you're ambitious and you don't feel you can ask for pay rises and you don't feel that, you know, you can really push your own agenda, then that whole kind of when am I successful piece won't feature either, because that's almost claiming something. So I think it's a hard thing for a lot of people to spot. It's like knowing when you're happy. And again, I think there's something around, you know, we set a goal. And so for me, I wanted to be a CIO before I was 50. I did my goal, so tick, I'm done. You know, I think after that, you kind of have, you know, you've made sure that you're enjoying what you're doing. And if you're not enjoying what you're doing, then you can't be successful. So it's tricky to always assign it to a goal or a position, because, you know, you might always aspire to be an IT director or a CIO, and then you get it and you absolutely either hate the organization you're doing it in, or you hate the responsibility and what comes with it. So I think we probably do as a society try and attach success to an achievement or a goal, whereas I think there's something around having a loosely attainable goal, but making sure that your whole world's rounded, because otherwise it won't feel successful. You know, if you're working 23 hours a day to make it a success, then, you know, that doesn't necessarily tick the successful boxes. But yeah, I think for me, you know, getting the CIO role at Boohoo and what we've done since has definitely ticked me. I have done what I wanted to do in my career, but equally, you know, I've built an enormously strong team. You know, I'm immensely proud of our 4 children and what they're doing, and so your life is around, you know, those buckets that you get your successes from, and sometimes they're not your successes; they might be shared successes that other people in your life are doing.
Yeah, if no one else wants to jump in, I've got a really nice one now that I'm going to go around. So I'll stay with you just before I move on, Joe, and then we'll go around everyone. This says, thank you all for your insights today. What is a piece of advice that you would each give to your younger selves? I think that's a great one. Do you want to start with that, Joe, and then we'll go around the table?
I think be yourself, be authentic. You know, don't shy away from the hard conversations, and you know, and maybe I should have articulated my ambition sooner and been a bit more out there around what I wanted. But yeah, for me, it's be as authentic. Don't deviate from authenticity.
I think that's great advice. What about you, May?
You know what, I was going to say exactly the same. Sort of younger in my career, you kind of, you know, when you're less experienced, you kind of think, right, what do I need to do to move on? I need to be more like these people. And you kind of think that's where you lose your authenticity and you lose your way a bit. And you kind of think to yourself, that's where the self-doubt comes in. And you think, right, I'm not me. Am I doing the best that I can be? You spend more time channeling your effort into being something that you're not, rather than being who you are and just running with it. So, you know, I think when I realized that, I just thought, you know, forget that. I am who I am. If people like it, that's great. If they don't, then that's fine as well. And then you make your own way, and then all of your energy is channeled towards, doing the things that you believe in 100%, rather than trying to bend to everybody else's expectations. So that would be my advice. I just wish I did it earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. But that is one of the lovely things that comes with age, isn't it? What about you, Jacqui?
Yeah, so for me, there's definitely chase what you enjoy doing. Don't chase a promotion, don't chase a pay rise. Do the thing that you enjoy, and own your career goals, own where you want to go. And by that, I don't mean, I want to be at a level, whatever, but think about doing what you enjoy and what your pathways are. And certainly for me, I wish that I had planned my career earlier and thought about the things that I would need to do to get me there, and certainly plan it and be confident in achieving it. And that comes back to what we talked about before. You have your eye on a position and you decide not to go for it because you might not tick all of the boxes. Be more confident and be more brave in going for things that you might not naturally go for. But if it's something that you enjoy doing, you will naturally excel in it.
I think that's great advice. I recently read something that said that if you're looking at a job advert and you know that you can do it all and you tick every box, it's not the job for you, because you should always be challenging yourself, which I thought, again, was great advice. What about you, Myra? What would be the advice that you would give your younger self?
I think I was so ambitious, and not out there in your face ambitious, to Joe's point, you never speak about it, but you're ambitious on the inside. And I would take on roles that I probably did not enjoy, or part of my, I guess, my North Star to get where I needed to from a career leveling perspective. And I think my advice to myself would be, don't let ambition detract you from stuff that you enjoy doing as well, because you'll end up leaving that position and we'll be looking for something where you fit in more. So that's one. It's about not letting ambition distract you from doing the stuff that you enjoy, because enjoying your job is very important. You spend a lot of hours in it. The other bit is around trying to fit in. I moved countries, cultures, and when I came to the UK, I left a bit of my identity to the side to try and slot into what was the better way of behaving, speaking. And then I realized that's not great for well-being. So don't lose yourself in your journey, because it will affect you much more holistically, I think. So that's really important. Stick to your authentic self, and don't try and be anything else.
I think that's great. And I think that's a really lovely way of us wrapping up today's panel discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed it all. I just want to thank you all again for taking the time to come and help us celebrate International Women's Day today. And thank you to everyone for joining today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And until next time, I'm going to say bye for now. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.